Greetings, everybody. A very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. I hope everybody has had a terrific week, and I don't know about you, it's been never been busier the start of the year. I'm beginning to wonder whether going into business is the right thing to do if you don't like work, but there we go. Bit of hard work, suppose never hurt anyone. How are you all? Hope you're all very, very well. I'm just going to go off and I've got my speakers on. I'm getting noises off, so I'll be with you in one second. Who's doing the hoovering?
I can hear nothing.
Oh, you can hear nothing. Okay, well, good evening. And we were actually having a little chat just before the stream went live about, how we structure these wonderful events, which I look forward to every week. And I'm so pleased to see you all. It's very interesting to know whether we need to just keep it as a free-flowing thing, or whether having subject matter and the occasional guests along. I don't know. I mean, I'll probably not do that conversation here, but we can maybe have an email conversation. I'll do it early next week, so just get some feedback. But anyway, who has got something they'd like to discuss, an issue that has jumped up and bitten them in the backside, or has astonished them and delighted them, and they'd like to share with the group so we can start the conversation? Who's got some thoughts?
So I've posted that link, Nick, to this white paper released today that's looking at the further education landscape in the UK, and the main message from it is government have finally recognised that we have far too many overqualified graduates and not enough higher level technicians, as they kind of describe them, I think. Finally, somehow, somewhere, the message got through. Now the white paper talks a lot about what the government's intending to do about it. And the bit that worries me most, that there's a lot of employer-led stuff in there, which probably means zero funding behind it, because employers can clearly fund themselves. We'll see, but I'm quite positive that it's building on a good basis of what I've seen so far, and maybe in 4 or 5 years' time it might start to address the shortage we have now of those kind of technician grades.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they paid Deloitte £1 million a day to come up with a premise that we're all very familiar with. I think, am I right in saying, Graham will probably be able, Graham has just joined us. Graham, we're talking about the FE white paper today on further education. And I think I'm right in saying that government funding for FE students is £1,600 a year, compared with something like 5,600 or 6,000 more for university level students. Johnson did absolutely promise to increase FE funding. That's been part of his policy platform for the longest time. I'm rather disturbed to hear you say, Roy, that the white paper doesn't actually
no, the
notion of increasing funding.
No, there is funding in there. I can't remember the figure, but it's about 2.5 billion he's promising.
Oh, okay, so good. Because I mean, the colleges, they're a shadow of their former selves, and they need to be, and they are the vital link between school leavers and employment in whether it's manufacturing or elsewhere. Hamish, a warm welcome. This is your first visit to the Central, the Kaizen Central, and it's a great delight to see you here. 10 seconds to just say hello and who you are and what you do.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad that I found this group. I'm Hamish Price. I, for my sins, have 20 years plus IT experience across most sectors, including finance and into manufacturing. And I do cyber control, data privacy, physical control within manufacturing, mostly coming from the chemical side of the world.
Okay, well, brilliant, lovely to see you. And we are talking FE. John, your comment in the chat box could have saved a lot of time. Just said, let's follow the German model. That cuts right across the board in many ways, does it not?
Just for manufacturing, yeah. They seem to do so much right in manufacturing that we get wrong, and why not just learn from it?
Yeah, I suspect it's a question of harnessed, a lot of horses in the same harness, instead of a pack of horses pulling in different directions. They seem to understand what their priorities are, but hey ho, we've been down that track many times before. Good evening, those who've just joined us, just logged in. Hi, everybody. We're just talking about further education because the white paper, long promised white paper, has been announced today. And Roy mentioned that there seems to be an awful lot of initiatives which are employer led in that. Are we confident that enough employers actually either have the time and the energy, because they're running their businesses 110%, but in some cases the will to get involved? And is this not a danger of being a damp squib?
I'd like to say that first of all, further education has a challenge because many businesses don't really take the time to get very clear on what their current and future skills needs are. Also, they seem to have an expectation that FE should provide all the skills to suit their specific needs. And I would encourage every business to get involved with their local FE and ensure that whatever is created, delivered, provided for them suits their unique needs. So I would always encourage businesses to positively and proactively find the time to get involved, because FE will never, ever, ever in a month of Sundays have the skills, the insights, and the experiences to serve you the way you need your company to be served. That's my 2 pence.
That is fantastic. That's absolutely nailed it, Robert. Because the great horror story that I always tell was of a small electrical components company in Surrey, very proactive. Took on apprentices, that kind of thing. Put them through the local FE college, and were horrified to discover that towards the end of the first year, the college was trying to recruit the apprentices to become the course tutors in the following year, because they just didn't have the people who could deliver the training, which of course is ridiculous and demonstrates quite why this white paper is so welcome. And I'll have a good look at it, actually. Roy, thank you for bringing it up and sending the link across, because I think that is just astounding how weakened FE has become. Does anybody have connections with their local FE colleges? So, Graham, I mean, you're perhaps the most active among us, dare I say it, but I think you would be with the Leeds Manufacturing Festival.
Well, yeah, one of our sponsors of the Leeds Manufacturing Festival is Leeds City College, and they are really quite proactive in that sense, that they know they need to contact manufacturers and they need to get more involved with industry, so they're sponsoring us to run the festival. And so we're in the process at the minute. We've set up for them a meeting rather like this online with a manufacturing leader from different companies, talking about their company, their career, and then answering the students' questions. and we're posting those videos on the website so other young people in Leeds can look at them and learn from it. So Leeds City College is really quite good. It's interesting the story you're telling about the place in Surrey. If you go back 5 or 6 years, Leeds City College were in that state. They had no tutors. We were sending apprentices down there, and there were 5 or 6 classes sharing one tutor moving between classrooms. But for whatever reason, they've got themselves in gear now, and they're much better.
Oh, that's a great story, actually, Graham. Because the funding model hasn't changed until this white paper offers hope that it will change. So it means that change is possible without necessarily. Do you know if they got commercial sponsorship or anything to help them?
I don't think it was sponsorship. I think it was a change in, like most things in life, it's leadership. And they had new leadership into the college and new leadership into the engineering sector, and they're more dynamic, and they realise they have to, work. They can't be an island. They have to work with industry.
Yeah, I can imagine that an awful lot of leaders in the FE sector must have been pretty demoralised over the years. But how fantastic to learn of a team at Leeds. A confession. I don't know why it's a confession, but very early in my life, I was an article clerk to an accountant's firm in Swindon for my sins, and they sent me to Leeds Polytechnic to study accountancy for a year and to get my first layer of qualifications to become a chartered accountant. And I'm afraid the student life for this young 17, 18-year-old was just too much, and I completely flunked it and ended up as a journalist. I mean, was it accountancy's loss or journalism's gain? I really can't work that one out. You'll have to be the judge of that. Seriously, I couldn't do the accountancy. It wasn't in my blood. Okay, anybody else got any thoughts on this or other issues they'd like to raise? Sarah, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm very fortunate that our local college, which is Western College, I'm based in Bristol, they are very, very proactive. So in fact, I sort of joined the Somerset Chamber, and we had a manufacturing forum event today, and there were sort of 2 members of Western College participating in that. So they are very proactive, both with the manufacturing sector and with construction. So they do a lot of work directly with businesses.
Well, that's very good. That's very good to hear. Am I seeing other hands go up? It's very difficult for me to see, but do yell if you'd like to make a point or have another issue you'd like to raise. Paul, was that a hand going up? Good evening to you.
It was me trying to shoo the dog away, actually, Nick, because he was. My wife just delivered a cup of coffee, which was very welcome. And I was trying to shoo the dog away and trying to have a bit of peace without it for 5 minutes. So no, I was just interested why a Swindon accountancy firm has a tie-up with Leeds Polytechnic, or was that a reflection on you as one of their trainees, and they were trying to distance themselves?
No, it was simply that there were, back in the day, I mean, we're now talking significant time ago, the way you did your first year of, or your first levels of accounting exams as an article clerk, you could either do them in-house, and that meant going to, I don't think it meant going to a local college. I think, I'm not quite sure how it happened, or you could just go away to an accredited college, and
right,
the one that had a place was Leeds, and that was it, frankly. Had a marvelous time there, marvelous time. Yeah, we won't go into that.
Another time, perhaps.
Another time over a pint of beer, but actually it wasn't the accountancy that did for me. It was the statistics and economics. They really flummoxed me. That's the bit I flunked and failed. So there we go. Okay, anybody got any thoughts or topics they want to talk about? Things that have been rattling their cage this week?
I guess so. This one thing I'd like to just ask is, obviously the trading cooperation agreement was welcome when it arrived at the 11.5 hour, if we can put it like that. But the 1,200 pages of detail that came with it feels like some of the small print is still being worked through, still being understood, and the implications will be felt for some time to come. Just from the businesses that are involved in this call tonight, just some feedback really as to how they're finding it, or feedback they've had from clients or associates or partners in the first couple of weeks of, if there has been any sort of new trade or continuation of trade with Europe.
But just before you logged on, Paul, Mark Weymouth had a point he was making about something to do with HMRC. Mark?
Yeah, I was just commenting before the 11th hour, or the almost 12th hour, when the customs duties were declared that they weren't going to be enforced. I, like many businesses, applied for duty handling with HMRC. I had a phone call from a nice chap today saying that he was just working down his list at the end of January, and did I still require HMRC to process my application. So just interesting that takes 2 months for HMRC to look at a list and still haven't started. So everything seems incredibly late.
Paul, there's a thread on Twitter that I'll send you. It's from an electrical components. Actually, I think they're not components company. I think they're end products. But it was just a litany of disaster, of not getting commodity codes, hauliers refusing to pick stuff up. It's just like an air of chaos has descended over certain parts of the supply chain. And I actually asked him if he'd come on the show tonight to talk about it. And the thing is that it's an anonymous account. He said I couldn't possibly say anything about this in public because they're quite a large company, but it was quite an insight. Right. I'll send it to you. It'll give you an idea of what's going on. John.
Yeah, I was just going to throw my two halfpennies in. I mean, the only thing that I've been hearing from my SMEs this week has been about border issues. A lot of it of their own making, because they just haven't, well, it's 50-50. They haven't really invested their own time to try and understand. And then those who have, the late information means that it's been very difficult. One thing I was just going to highlight was groupage. A lot of people that I'm working with are shipping groupage, and they get all of their documentation right, and then the van that their stuff is in gets held up because of somebody else's consignment. So they're taking on board a lot of extra costs at the moment to avoid groupage.
Yeah, Roy.
Yeah, not that I'm saying that any of this isn't happening, but just on the positive side, last week we shipped telecommunications payload from Portsmouth to Toulouse. That's probably, I don't know, about £100 million worth of kit. And it went successfully, but it probably took us about 4 times the effort that it does normally in terms of aligning customs, aligning the haulier, making sure that the reception on the other side is okay. And these things are very critical. They go with a diesel generator that keeps the environment up to the right levels. And if it runs out of fuel, then that's our £100 million satellite at risk. So we had to make sure it went, and that's what it took. It was about 4 times the effort that we would use normally to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is that it's that kind of effort for something, if it's worth 50 quid and 100 million, and it's worth it for 100 million, it's not worth it if it's 50 quid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the interview I did today with the fella from the Chemical Industries Association, an awful lot of this logistical and paperwork stuff will eventually die down. There'll be some casualties, and there'll be some people who say, well, I'm just not going to export, I'm not going to import, or that kind of thing. But the kind of thing, Paul, that he was telling me about, you may already know, but the regulatory regime covering chemicals is probably one of the most severe and far-reaching, simply because of the nature of the product, as you'd imagine. And they were telling the government all the way through that we had to stick with the EU REACH, R-E-A-C-H. I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's the regulatory regime governing everything to do with chemicals. And the government, because of the ideology of Brexit, said no, and because it would mean we couldn't set our own regulations in future. So it's going to cost £1 billion and take about 6 years for us to rebuild our own REACH system, while at the same time playing catch up all the time with the EU, because whatever the government may say about wanting to set our own regulations, why would we do that when the regulations that matter are the ones that the EU set, because that's the largest market. And so we're going to be shadowing their regulations all the way, but at huge cost. And a whole new government department is going to be set up to manage it inside BEIS, I think, or inside DEFRA, because it's an HSE. No, it's oddly enough, Department of Work and Pensions. There you go, because that's the HSE comes under that, the Health and Safety Executive. Absolute minefield, absolute disaster. And people are having so much difficulty trying to work with it. I'll send you the link on some of that stuff, because that is going to be long term, deep, and a very difficult consequence of the agreement.
Was that Steve Elliott you were talking to, Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah. Useful.
Yeah. He's a good guy. And very concerned, and they're actually lobbying the government to go back to the EU and say, look, this is actually a form of madness to try and make us do this, because everything we do, there will be nothing we do that's going to be separate from what the EU does.
It has to be completely aligned by its very definition. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Absolutely, by the very nature of the business. Oh, yeah. Anybody else got any thoughts on this?
Yeah.
People who, Barry, because you export.
We do, and there's good and bad. In that, yes, there's added friction into the EU, and it's mainly around paperwork. And yes, it is taking a little bit longer because it's the first time. And the people that were getting sign off on documents are a little bit hesitant. But, we've had multiple, probably 5 or 6 shipments now into the EU, all gone fine, he says, and it was a little bit of a headache for the individuals filling in the paperwork. The biggest headache is, I think the last time I saw it, our government had thrown something like 350 million at the communications campaign for us to get ready. And I think you should only control the things that you can control, and we had control of getting ready, and I'd like to think Playdale, we were unbelievably ready. We'd had a Brexit risk register for about 4 years, and I think the proof of that is things have gone very, very smoothly. The problem's at the other end. The Netherlands and Germany didn't throw 350 million at it, saying, if you work with a British company, you do know you'll need a customs agent, and you do know that you'll have to do this, that, and the other. So where the friction's happening is at the other end, I'm finding. And, there's a lot of like, oh, how does this work then? And we've educated our guys, but, that email was filed too, or, it's going to take time to work it out. But still, as it stands, it's far, far easier to get it into the EU than we've got 2 going next week, one to Saudi and one to Egypt. And it's a bloody nightmare because they change the legislation every week, what documents you need. Every time we ship to Saudi, it causes some kind of ruckus somewhere. So in perspective, I think it's teething problems. One thing that I did hear of a big pushback, and I did have a blind panic yesterday, was I'd been on my soapbox quite a lot about these heat-treated pallets and making sure that if we crash out of the EU, you would need heat-treated pallets to move your products. Mm-hmm. And however, there's products being turned around in France now or not getting over the French border because they're not on heat-treated pallets. So when I heard that, I panicked like mad and got onto our logistics, and they went, no, don't worry, Barry. We've had our stuff on heat treated pallets since mid-December because you went on about it so much. So, and then I pushed it further, and I've got people that saying, no, their products have been fined on non-heated treated pallets. But then there was 2 other people that sparked up and said, no, we've been told categorically it has to be on heat treated pallets, which there will be a national shortage, or there already is, if you're going to get it. So, you know, you get all your parts, you make your product, and then you can't stick it in the wagon because it's on the wrong would be a big issue in the short term, I think.
I've not heard this issue, Barry. Why do we need heat treated pallets now? Did we not need them all along, or what?
No. So if I ship to Australia at the moment, or well, anywhere else of the EU, my communicatable diseases could shut Australia down. But because we were such frequent traders and open borders with the EU, they didn't mind if they caught my cold. That's all heat treated pallets is. It means it kills, you know, anything that's growing on there, etc. And the timber's not carrying any termites and stuff like that. So now, though, if you ship into the EU, it needs to be on a heat treated pallet from a third country. We weren't a third country when we were in the EU. So it's a bit of a
that's something we
silent
should have
war.
invested in.
I think you'll find that become a huge issue in the next week or so, because there will be a mass shortage.
Wow.
I'd only ever heard of that for New Zealand and Australia. I didn't realise it was any other part of the world in Europe.
That came out yesterday.
Oh my. Alec, are you exporting? Have you sent anything since the start of the year?
Not since Brexit, but we had the same issue sending stuff to India. It had to be, I can't remember the stamp on the wood, but all the pallets and boxes had to be treated or whatever kind of wood it was.
Just to add to it, it wasn't the EU that insisted on this, it was the British negotiators. And all pallets that are coming in from the EU have to be heat treated into the UK. So if we're, you know, net importer, you know, there should be plenty of heat treated pallets coming in, but they won't be new, you know. So there's definitely a black market in heat treated pallets right now if you can get them off the wagons as they're coming in. But it's the British negotiators that said, no, we're the third country and we don't want to catch French measles from you or get your termites.
Not like us to overzealously apply a rule, is it?
No, genius.
Just going back to the earlier FE argument, I think, I left school at 16, did an apprenticeship, got qualified, went back to university as a mature student, and I have to say it wasn't the best 3 years of my life. I think there's a whole stigma around the technical college issue, and I think some of that actually comes from my generation, the parents, who perhaps themselves never went to university, have this sort of vision of what university they think is, and they want their kids in university. I know in my immediate social group, there's kids in university that shouldn't be there, but they're there because it's important to the parents that their kids are in university. And I think that's part of the issue. That might change as the generations move through and it becomes less of a stigma. So going to university doesn't make you clever. Not going to university doesn't make you stupid. But I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I went to Poly that 1 year and I didn't go to university. I went on holiday to Jersey to work with a mate of mine on an ice cream van, and saw an advert for the local TV station. They wanted a journalist, so I took it. I went for it and took it. I had something. I was 20 by then, so I'd had a couple of other jobs. But yeah, it's University of Life. That's us, Alec. Hey?
But is that not part of the problem? Like, because whatever we teach people in schools and universities now, they are not going to be doing that at the end of their career. What we need to be teaching is a culture of, I need to be retrained. I can be retrained. I'm going to have to change jobs and careers a number of times through that life of their working life. And it's about changing or teaching a culture rather than teaching a skill that's going to be out of date. And I had exactly the same argument in 1984 at Aston University with the Chancellor who was teaching us. He said we had an unskilled workforce. And I said, no, we have a workforce that's skilled in the wrong things. that are no longer relevant. It's not that they're unskilled.
No, that's an absolutely fair point. Okay, any other thoughts? Ram, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. And if it's not too late, very happy New Year to everyone. I'm just going to hide my face now. But the point is, what Alec mentioned just now is what I keep talking about at the risk of sounding like a broken record. And I know for a fact that Steve's going to disagree with me, Steve Mercy, as soon as I bring the words out. We need to be teaching them a lot of life skills like resilience, mental toughness, critical thinking, analytical reasoning, problem solving, so that whenever there is a need for a change of skills, the youngsters are equipped with the right mindset and the right culture that Alex spoke about, that will help them find the skills that are required and find ways in which to train themselves and upskill or reskill themselves. And I think for the large part as an industry and as probably society as well, we seem to have dropped the ball on that one. And I think that's again due to our short-termism rather than looking at the long-term benefits of doing these things. I mean, that's my take on the matter based on what I've seen and what I hear wherever I go these days.
Yeah, I have a feeling that somewhere along the line, lifelong learning was part of Boris Johnson's. I think there is something in there. Roy, you may, is that in
yeah,
the?
there is. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
they call it the Lifelong Learning Fund or something like that. I've not read all 77 pages yet, but there's definitely support in there for that kind of idea. So,
well, that's good. Richard, good evening.
Good evening. I do concur with what Ram's saying, is that there does need to be skills outside just the GCSE and the A levels. The difficulty is, as an enterprise advisor for Matthew Moss Secondary School and Rochdale Sixth Form in Rochdale, is the lecturers are just overworked. And the whole point is they have this thing called compass, and they have to meet these targets and meet these targets and meet these targets and meet the. And it's like, well, when are you going to be able to squeeze anything else on top of? My two kids went to Bradford Grammar, expensive private school, and the ratio of children to the lecturers completely different. They've got that. The lecturers have got the time to give all the other skills, and they did learn all the other skills outside their core competence. And it's exactly what we're saying here: is as long as you've got the mechanism to be able to learn, you've gained so much. And that's the only reason why me at 50, I'm learning more now than I did at university, and I loved university because they've got the growth mind, and the other one is that love of wanting to learn, which is where people normally close down because it's you've got to do this, you've got to do, I don't want to, I enjoy doing that. And there needs to be that we have got the diversity, and that diversity is encouraged rather than straitjacketed that we all have to achieve the same. One of the the fun parts is there is a large company, and it could be the same one that you're talking about that can't be mentioned, is because it's owned by America, the Americans literally see the degree as a passport. And anybody who wants to get into that company you will not get anywhere without a university degree. And that is obviously a complete bigoted point of view of sort of saying, you know, where does the talent come from? It's not qualifications. It's what Ram said the other day. It's aptitude and willingness. And it really is. It's the mindset of a person. That's what we interview on people. So my team of 35, it's all to do with the mindset, and that's what makes it successful.
Julian, good evening.
I just wondered whether a short-term fix, I mean, you know, trying to change the whole of the education system, probably lots of clever people addressing that and whether it's bad or not. But one of the most effective influences on the success of organizations is mentoring. And there's a very well-trodden process, particularly in the areas that I'm involved in, and broadcasting and media, content management, whatever. I'm afraid, as I always say every week, not manufacturing, of people who have sort of been there and done it, coming back to do talks, do mentoring, taking a part in very well established mentoring programs. But just listening to this conversation, it makes me realize that maybe there's a really strong need for cross-industry mentoring, simply taking people who run engineering companies to mentor young emerging entrepreneurs and people running the businesses is great, but maybe it'd be good to have people out of not conflicting, but what shall I say, sort of contrasting industries. And I mean, unless somebody's sort of really unhappy, you know, how they've emerged from their career and it's not gone well for whatever, there's an incredible latent kindness and generosity with most people who've had successful careers to, you know, it's a bit corny, but sort of to give back. And, you know, I mean, I do talk at business schools, but they're all the same bunch of people that I would expect to see, you know, all postgraduate clever people who want to, you know, create fintech companies and, you know, sort of things in the technology area. And I wonder if there's a campaign. I mean, you know, I wrote it down, Nick, you know, what you're going to ask us afterwards to contribute to what Kaizen can do. But I think if somebody could create a more enlightened clearinghouse for mentoring, matching engineering companies with volunteer talent, I bet it would take off really well.
Interesting. Neeraj, you wanted to say something a moment ago.
Yeah, so what Alec was saying, that university education doesn't really make people more intelligent, and lack of it doesn't make them stupid. But at the same time, what Richard said, there are entry barriers with the people who are not having the degree, especially in today's competitive environment. People who are not having university degrees, and that too from good universities, there are barriers for them to get past the first screening stage for entry into any corporate with all those application tracking softwares at work. They will not even pick up your application if you don't have the relevant degree from a categorized university on your CV. So it is important. And as far as life skills are concerned, even though kids may not be picking those in the universities, but I have seen a new breed of life coaches emerging, and they are out to teach everyone, you and me included, what is required to acquire those life skills even late in the day. So I've seen a few of my friends who were doing, into well-paid jobs. They have quit those jobs and taken up full-time, life coaching assignments. So changing times, and I think changing needs.
Yeah, I think that I was talking to Ram offline a couple of days ago about the victory the other day by the Indian test team against Australia, and how this was a team of no-hopers. It was a second rung team. All the stars had been laid low with injury or illness. And these guys, who could be said to be coming from the FE layer of the Indian cricket establishment rather than the university layer, they went up against a fully leaded team of Australian cricketers and beat them out of sheer spirit, gumption, team spirit and everything else. And that, for me, there was a metaphor in there about you don't have to be, it's not just being the best at something and having a certificate that says you are. It's also about the way you approach things. John, you wanted to make a comment on, and Steve also. John first.
Yeah, I was just going to mention on Julian's point about mentoring, that call I've just come off was Be the Business Mentors. And I'm mentoring, it's cross-sector, as Julian was saying. I've found myself mentoring a training company in Manchester. And yeah, there's definitely things that I can bring around process management and performance management that they're not doing. So I would definitely say that's a need. And if anyone's interested in being a Be the Business Mentor, I know they're looking out for more mentors and mentees. So maybe that's something we could support, and that could be the clearinghouse you were talking about, Julian.
Mm-hmm.
John, would you mind putting, if you know it, if you can just put a link to it, or just put the name so we can Google it in the chat box? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, the Be the Business, sure.
Steve, good evening to you.
How you doing? Just a couple of things. One is with respect to life skills. I think there's a whole stack of organisations already producing good life skills, and these typically things I've talked to quite a few of my friends about. And I would put them as organisations such as the Scout movement, the Duke of Edinburgh Award movement, that teach an awful lot of respect for people, continuous learning, resilience. But to be quite honest, I don't. When I've been in companies, I don't find those skills particularly well recognised by a lot of the senior management within the companies. I mean, I've actually quite some time ago I brought up, I'd say, well, we need a mentoring program here. We need to really make sure these people come in, and we don't expose them to a sudden barrage of inverse snobbery and this is what it's really like, mate. We soothe it over. We help them to get better quicker, and to pick up the skills that Ram talks about. So I don't think those skills are really recognised at all by industry, and I think that they're going to have to get their act together and start realising that this skill is probably already in their organisation. And because it's the sort of skill that often takes a bit of time to develop, often works on medium and longer term issues as opposed to just doing, if you invest in yourself, you're not going to go on a course and pass the test and then be able to say, well, I can do this. You're going to have to practice it for time and time. And that really gets better and quicker with mentoring. But I really didn't find that that stuff was well rewarded in industry when I worked for mainly for bigger American companies. And what I mean by rewarded is that sometimes you could barely get a thank you out of your manager or from senior staff for it. So that's going to cost them nothing. So I think companies really need to understand the benefit of what is there already, and yeah, that's my say. I think there's a whole load of it there already, and it's just not being used.
Yeah, I think that Niraj hit on something when he suggested that actually the culture is changing, but obviously not as quickly as we'd all like. Ram.
I want to briefly talk about three things. The first one is going back to the cricket thing that Nick mentioned earlier. There's now a new joke in the Indian cricket community. Virat Kohli, the captain, leaves on paternity leave and the Indian team delivers. So I'll leave it for a minute there to digest. Second thing is talking about what Julian spoke about mentoring. I've been a member of this organization called TIE. Nick, you're aware of it. We did the event TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs. And that organization was set up in Silicon Valley in 1992 or somewhere like that, with the intentions of mentoring, incubation, innovation, education, and entrepreneurship and things like that. So the thing is, what I'm trying to say is, I've got my mentor in Thai, who's got nothing to do with what I do in my business. He deals with textiles import and export. That's an entirely different industry to what I do. And I have a mentee who does something entirely different to what I do. He's into agriculture and plants and things like that. So that organization has by far been one of my best investments in terms of membership, and what I'm getting out of it is phenomenal. And finally, I've started reading this book, which is about 7 years old. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And the simple philosophy behind this book is about changing your habits. Over a period of time, you get used to doing certain things, and those things become habits. And then those habits, which were good at one point of time, become detrimental to your progress. So how do you bring yourself to change those habits? And I'm finding this book fascinating. So that's the book. If anybody wants to quickly grab a screen grab, or I can type it in the chat box. So yeah.
I'm just putting Ty's simplest Thai.org. There you go. The Indus Entrepreneurs. They've got membership for all over the world. It's a global thing. It's very good. Yeah.
Can I just come in on the back of that?
Sure.
John may or may not know, but I'm actually a fellow of Be the Business, and I've just had a Be the Business board meeting all afternoon. That's the way I look a bit frazzled. and then jumped on the mentoring call with John. We've done 850 mentorships in the last 12 months. So I wouldn't say they're looking to scale it even more. They are looking for people. There's no charge for this. I've got 5 people that I'm mentoring at this moment in time at different time scales. Some are well over a year, and I see less. A couple are new, so you're seeing them more, and you're communicating with them more. And it doesn't have to be. I think it helps if you're in a related industry, but you don't want to mentor a competitor, so you're not going to get anyone that's bang on the same as you are. But it's great if you've got similar interests or networks, and that's what I found helps. But there's success stories in there where people are just completely opposite ends of the spectrum, because it's a safe environment for people to ask stupid questions, and that's what helps. And people then can give guidance, and you get a lot back from it as well. I'm big on about giving back. That's why I don't mind giving my time up pro bono and doing it. So tomorrow afternoon I've got an hour and a half with a guy, and so it's out there. So Be the Business is, I think it's, the keen to beat this productivity puzzle. That's what it's all about. We've discussed it before. You've got the link on there, and if anyone wants any more details or introducing, feel free to reach out. Okay.
Barry, that's very interesting. What age and sort of career level is the person you're mentoring?
Well, like I say, I've got 5 at the moment. They're all, the ones that I'm mentoring at the moment are all business leaders, so leading SMEs, and they're all SMEs and of differing size and differing profitability. There's one at the moment that is a small woodwork company in Liverpool that makes staircases and turnover a couple of million. And then there's an IT company that's looking for a valuation of 57 million right now. And I'm mentoring one of their directors. So yeah, all different. But Be the Business, it's all different levels within businesses, and it's all different ages. And they've got a really good balance. It started off with some of the big companies, and still the majority of the mentors are GSK's given X of their senior management, John Lewis Partnership, BAE have given, I don't know, 50, 100 mentors. They've all given their time in goodwill, if you like. So there's a lot of big businesses in there doing the mentoring as well.
That is fantastic, and obviously great kudos to you and John and everybody involved. I'm wondering if anybody knows of a similar scheme whereby younger members or junior members of companies can mentor young people, apprentices, and so on. Whether a scheme such as that exists, and is that in a sense what you were getting at, Julian, something available to younger people to help them with some of these missing skills that they don't get at school or college?
No, I wasn't actually. I was meaning, and what the question I asked has been very ably answered, that in senior management. But the idea, I think there are sort of, maybe it's an American thing, but aren't there sort of junior CEO clubs and stuff like that that you can join as a young manager? I mean, I'm sure that exists already.
Okay, Steve. Yeah. Oh, Steve, or were you telling the dog to go away?
We have a talent team at Playdale. We're only an SME, but we have 10. So there's 10 people at the moment in that talent team, and every year we refresh it out, and some people come in and some people leave, and it's all about developing that talent to be the future leader of the business, or in different areas of the business. Maybe not all be CEOs. We had a meeting this morning, an hour and a half. It's great, and it's developing their skills, and people that you never thought would read a book or listen to a podcast, waxing lyrical about such and such a person's podcast, and it's great. And they're all mentoring each other. Then it's just keeping them educated into it.
You have a superb company there, Barry. When the lockdown's over, I'm going to come up and spend a bit of time with you up there. great place. If you'll have me, of course. Any more thoughts? Any more thoughts?
Just to add to that, Nick, we talked about mentoring, which I think is a fantastic internal way of developing people. We had a webinar we did yesterday on the role of coaching in manufacture, and I think that's also quite challenging. You can have people who are very long in the teeth and have a lot of experience, but you're really trying to grow up people who can take responsibility for themselves. And then the ability to coach is not always so easy. You know, we can tend to give advice, but to actually coach is a different part of the spectrum, which gets the individual to think, well, what could you do? You know, what's relevant to you now? And I think that's really important for older people, to let the younger people have more freedom and empower them and give them confidence, because many of the ways we solve the problems of the future are not going to come out of the technical experience of the older generation. They'll be solved in a different way. So to kind of empower younger people to use skills that they have is going to be a really important skill. You know, the skill of coaching is going to be something which I think we need to invest in.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I talk quite glibly about, you know, getting you know, younger people who are beginning to progress through the business, then mentoring apprentices coming in, et cetera, but who teaches those older people how to actually do it? I mean, it's one thing to be a mentor, it's another to excel at it.
So Nick, I've got
sorry, Hamish.
Yeah, so I've got a thought on the back of that, which is probably quite interesting to Kaizen Central. So if you look at mentoring, there is a fundamental difference between the definition of mentoring in Western society versus Japanese. And I've had the delights of working for many years with lots of different Japanese companies, and they've got a term called Serpei Kohei. Now, I got that pronounced completely wrong, but it's almost like the Kaizen version of mentoring, and you expect it from Japanese culture, if anybody knows Japanese culture, that where in Western society, all the sort of negative things we probably talked about today on you know, universities and cranking out, you know, generic blobs that then still need, you know, life skills and the right aptitude. What the Japanese culture does is they treat mentoring more of an organic growth and less of the strategic, you know, what are the aims and targets, but more of the emotional connection and seeing how they can tie in both senior, middle management and juniors into an ongoing process. And I've seen it at work, I've been involved in it, and the really good schemes, what you end up seeing is the good senior mentors are educating the middle management, and the middle management start educating the junior management, and the junior management start making these bonds with juniors, however junior. And I've actually seen it come back up through the ranks, where actually that benefit of having people mentoring from completely different aspects, skill sets, really is useful, because actually you start seeing some of the old dogs getting taught new stuff from the juniors, because they're coming in from a completely different angle, completely different education. So I thought that was an interesting thought. The second thought I think is that the CV and your qualifications hopefully get you to the interview, but they don't get you the job. And actually it's aptitude that gets you to the job or keeping a job. You know, you can't teach the desire to actually want to succeed. And I've done mentoring remotely as well as large teams, and the average age of people that I think have been really, really successful at being mentored has been between 35 and 45, and there is a calmness, there is a respect, and they realize that things aren't given to you on a plate. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge I see from generic students being cranked out at universities. So if they've been pushed through a system, a generic statement, but there's a set expectation, that some of those individuals have to say, okay, well, I've got the degree in whatever science it is, petrochemical, IT, automation, whatever it is, and I've been set the expectation by lecturers and universities that if I've got a first in this, I expect a certain level of respect and wage and success, and that no one should expect that. You've got to graft.
Very fair point. Very fair point indeed. 5 minutes on the clock before supper time. Who's got some final thoughts? Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, sorry.
Me, yeah.
Yep.
No, I think there are a lot of people here doing great work mentoring people. Often it would seem on a pro bono basis, but that makes me wonder: is do companies really respect that or value it? Because it's not actually costing them anything. So, in other words, to what extent? I can imagine the individuals getting a great deal from it, but does the lesson or the value really sink into the companies and make them say, this is something we need to do more broadly? So in other words, although mentoring often helps people and rise up, a lot of the time what I find I'm struggling with in companies is not the fact that they have some totally excellent staff or that the top quarter is very good, but it's the width of the middle ground. And what you have to really improve the competencies in is by taking that middle ground and making it narrower, making the competencies that they have, whether it's in learning, in what they apply, what they've already done. It's the width of the middle ground that I find really kills companies, and not the fact that they've got some really talented people. So I think that probably the mentoring and the coaching that's happening is not happening broadly enough across the middle ground.
I'm being a bit dim here. When you mean the width of the middle ground, what do you mean by that?
Well, just imagine if you look at your middle ground, you've got your engineers, your purchasing people. So if you say to your engineers, what can you do, and you find that a lot of them, if they had to some of them might be able to do statistical process control, some of them might be able to do 5 whys, but there wouldn't be a solid core group of competencies that you could say my middle ground has that. In other words, they know the process they're in charge of. They can do continuous improvement on that process. They can run a team on that process. A lot of the time, they can only do 1 or 2 things out of that group. And to be quite honest, I found that the people who came out of the technical schools in France and in Switzerland that I had to work with, just a lot more solid in that area. If something new came up, you could say to them, can you have a look at that? And they'd go, oh, I'll give it a shot, mate, Whereas in this country, I would find, there'd be 20 reasons why they couldn't do it. Whereas the guys from these sort of solid technical schools from Europe, much better at, I'll give it a go. It'll take me an hour, mate. Or can we have a look at that next week on Wednesday when I've got a free 2 hours? And they'd sort of by hook or by crook, they'd get there. To be quite honest, our lot from all ranges, from universities or technical colleges, in that middle ground, just seem to find excuses to my mind. And I wouldn't stop at that. You have to find some way of changing that. But that's the situation I more consistently find myself in.
Julian, you raised your hand.
Well, I was going to say Roy, definitely, but probably others. I worked for France Telecom for a long time, so very, very, very knowledgeable about what how French company hierarchy works, and this concept of chef de cabinet, the basically what we would call a bag carrier, is unbelievably effective. It's quite elitist. But if you sort of lift that idea off the peg and we brought it into more companies, it would work, which is just basically you spot the early talent and you bestow on them something that maybe you can't extrapolate across the whole of the company. It's too resource draining, but you can do that. And it's not just called a fast track, it's actually assigning people to work, and they get elevated. These really competent people get elevated quite a senior level. It is a way of jumping their career, but the point is it's a direct organized mentoring system. It's really effective.
Well, John posted in the chat box, UK working culture is broken, discuss. I think that...
on that bombshell.
On that bombshell, as you say. For another time, perhaps. Listen, thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Absolutely wonderful meeting, as always. Really appreciate it. And hope to see... Well, I'll be here next Thursday. Hope to see as many of you as possible. Pass the word around, bring some friends. Let's get it going. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.